Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be looking at the big ideas for section 3.2 part 1. We're actually going to start down here in the bottom left hand corner with predictions. And we're going to look at this equation for our line of best fit. Now it has some other names that we'll get to eventually, but we'll just call it the line of best fit or our prediction equation. The y, remember this is y hat and this is the predicted value. A in general is our y-intercept and B is our slope. So if we label those things, we can label them like this. Y is the predicted value, A is the y-intercept, and B is our slope. Another big idea for this particular section is residuals and what they are and how to interpret a residual. How would we describe a residual? Well, let's remember what a residual is. It is the actual value of y minus the predicted value of y. So a residual is the actual y minus the predicted y. The actual y comes from your actual data that was collected. The predicted comes from your equation down here, this predicted y. We're also going to be asked to interpret or explain what the residual means. And you should use this model. It should be the actual blank was blank higher or lower than the predicted for blank. So what are these blanks here? Well, it starts off as the actual y value in context. You want to put all of this in context. So the actual y value was the residual value higher or lower. So if the residual value is positive or negative, that will determine the higher or lower, and the context will help you with that. Then the predicted for x equals whatever the value of x is. So in our lesson, we had an example of this, and you can go back and look at that example as well. But the actual y value in context was the residual value higher or the residual value lower than predicted for the value of x. The last big idea that we're going to be looking at is interpreting the y-intercept and interpreting the slope. This absolutely is something that you're going to be asked to do, not only on tests for me, but also on the AP test. It shows up almost every AP test. So let's start off with the y-intercept. How do we describe or interpret the y-intercept? Well, we would say this: when blank, the predicted blank is blank. So what are these blanks here? When x equals 0 in context, so for our example in class, it was when we use 0 rubber bands, so when x is 0 in context, the predicted y in context is whatever your y-intercept is. So when a student studies for 0 minutes, the predicted test score is 62%. Okay, you got to just, or 62 points. So this is all in context. When x is 0, the predicted y, whatever the y variable is going to be your y-intercept. Okay, I also want to just make note of right here. It is so important to have this word predicted in there. That's why I've got it in all capitals. If you don't put that predicted in your interpretation, then you're going to get dinged for it. So now let's look at slope. Slope would be interpreted this way. With each additional blank, the predicted blank increases or decreases by blank. So what goes into those? Well, I want to make note again that we're going to be using the word predicted. If you leave this term predicted out, you will get dinged for it. So let's take a look at what goes in the blanks. With each additional X in context, so with the rubber bands, it was with each additional rubber band, the predicted Y in context. So with each additional rubber band, the predicted distance Barbie will fall increases. In this case, it's increases because the slope is positive. If the slope were negative, it would be decreases. And how much does it decrease or increase by? It increases or decreases by the value of the slope. So again, you can look at the example that we had in class with Barbie, and this gives us the interpretation of slope. These two things right here, interpreting the y-intercept and interpreting the slope, are so important. If I were to add one more thing to this big idea, it would be for interpreting the y-intercept, and that is sometimes the y-intercept does not make sense. So if the y-intercept does not make sense and it doesn't have any meaning, you need to make note of that. And we'll see some examples of that as we move further into the course. Hopefully this helps, and hopefully you have a great day.